All right, we get it rolling on the Krug Show. Hope everybody's having a great Friday, August the 18th. It's 5:07 on the West Coast. That means it's 8:07 on the East Coast. See how I added that up? And joining us is Marc Adams from 49er Web Zone. And we're going to talk a little bit about Roger Craig and the 49ers. Of course, Niners go tomorrow at Levi's against Denver in preseason game number 2. I will be there. I'll do a post-game show from there. But we wanted to have Marc Adams on, and he's a great follow on Twitter, at 49ers Camelot. And he covers the Niners for 49er Web Zone. And Marc, good to see you, man. We've talked a few times in the last 6-7 months or so, and I know you've done a lot of a labor of love, but a lot of work to try to push the candidacy for Canton, Ohio, for the Pro Football Hall of Fame for ex-Niner running back Roger Craig. And I appreciate you joining me because I'd love to see nothing more than Roger walk across that stage. And thanks for joining me on the Krug Show.
Thanks, Larry. I'm honored, listen to you on the radio for a long time. And so it's really cool to be on here with you.
Well, why don't we talk about this? Because there was a 49er pregame show. And, of course, people know I did the Niner pregame show for KMBR with John Lund and Dennis Brown and others through the years for about 10, 12 years. And it was a couple years ago on the pregame show. And I talked to John and Dennis before the show. And I said, hey, guys, in a segment later in the show, I really, would love to shout out Roger Craig for the Hall of Fame. And, of course, Dennis is a class act and John's a total class act. And they're like, of course, Krug, we're all for Roger going to the Hall of Fame. And I had read a couple different articles and done some research on Roger Craig. And in my mind, as somebody who witnessed it and lived it, I knew that he was a Hall of Famer. Yeah. And I just thought to myself, yeah, this is an injustice that he's not in. And the more I talked to people, the more I felt like, you know what, Bill Walsh carried such credibility and such clout within the game of pro football that if he had stayed alive a few years longer, he would have pushed for Roger aggressively to be in that Hall of Fame. And in my mind, there's not a doubt in my mind that Bill would have been successful. And Bill was had the kind of power and had the kind of influence and had the kind of respect that he could say, Roger Craig's a Hall of Famer because of A, B, and C, and people would say, yep, he's a Hall of Famer and he belongs. Right. But Bill unfortunately died way too young, and we didn't. And so Roger has not had that advocate. Then you mix in the fact that the ownership has changed from Eddie D to Jed York and Denise DeBartolo York and Dr. John York. And I'm not saying that they don't have a vested interest in Roger being in. They would love Roger to be in. But I think some of that passion that Eddie D has, the Yorks are worried about getting Super Bowl number 6 and getting Levi Stadium built and hiring the right coach and just competing in the NFL. And this is another endeavor in and of itself. And so I think in some ways the ball has been dropped on Roger's candidacy. And so I went off for 10, 12 minutes on KMBR on a pregame show and just went through all the reasons that Roger Craig should be in the Hall of Fame. And I tried to frame it every way imaginable to, he's on the team of the decade. He's the only member of the team of the decade, running back wise, who didn't make it in the Hall of Fame. He was a Pro Bowler at halfback. He was a Pro Bowler at fullback. Not to mention, be a phenomenal ambassador for the game, but he also has better stats than many of the guys that are already in the Hall of Fame. And then when you look at the Niner dynasty, it's not represented the same way that the Steeler dynasty of the 70s or the Packer dynasty of the 60s is represented. And I'm not sure if that's because we're laid back here on the West Coast or if the Pittsburgh fans are closer to Canton and there's that connection. But for whatever reason, it hasn't yet happened for Roger, and Roger's not like Drew Pearson of the Cowboys. He's not gonna get irate. He's not gonna start crying and pissy and moaning and make a stink. And that's what I think got Drew Pearson in, is how he forcefully rejected the notion that he wasn't good enough, and he was right. But Rodgers' case, I think, is even stronger than Drew Pearson's case. And Rodgers just too classy of a guy to ever really champion this cause for himself. So I spit this out on the radio. You just happen to be listening that day. And you take it from there, because you really have taken the ball and run with it. If I took 5 steps down this road, you heard this case being made, and you've taken 50 more steps down this road. I'm so proud of the effort that you've put into this. I'm so honored to be connected with this. Tell people kind of what you heard from me and what impact it had on you and where you've gone with it.
Yeah, I'm driving down the road and you're spitting out this information. And so because I was driving down the road, I couldn't be writing things down. So I write for 49ers Web Zone, and I decided, like, this is really good stuff. And some of it I hadn't heard, like the fact that Roger Craig has more receptions and more receiving yards than John Stallworth. So, I mean, to me, that I was struck by that a Hall of Fame receiver has less catches and receiving yards than Roger Craig, a running back. And so, I'm thinking, okay, if Roger Craig was a receiver, would he already be in, because he has better numbers? He has almost as many Super Bowls, only one less. And so I just really was compelled to write about this case. So I reached out to you and said, hey, can you send me that information? I'm just looking for a Word document or something, a PDF, anything. And you said, hey, give me a call. Here's my number. And so you gave me all those information. I am furiously writing. And then you said, what we need is, this story needs to grab a lot of attention. And so I'm like, okay, so how do I do that? And you said, you need to get Joe, you need to get Steve, you need to get Jerry, you need to get Ronnie on board. And I said, well, how do I get them? And you said, I don't know. You're probably not going to be able to get them. And so I just so happened to meet somebody who worked for the 49ers back in the Dynasty days. And I actually was introduced to him on Twitter from somebody else. And so I reached out to that person and I said, hey, here's what I'm writing on. Is there any way that you can help me get in touch with some former 49ers? And he said, who do you want? And so I'm thinking, all right, well, maybe he'll give me Brent Jones and some offensive linemen. But I just started at the top. I said, how about Joe, Steve, Jerry, Ronnie, Brent? And he's like, done. And he sent me all these. And I was blown away at how well they responded, not because of me, because they don't have a clue who I am.
Sure.
But they want so bad for Roger to be in the Hall of Fame. And so that, through this process and for this video series, because I wrote the story, then I followed up that story last year with one where I got a statement from Mike Singletary and from who was the other one? Somebody else that I can't think of right now. To guys that played against him. And so from that point, I'm thinking, okay, we've made a good case, but he still didn't get in. So early this year, we decided we're going to do a podcast series, because some people would prefer to watch or listen rather than read. And so what I found out through this process and in talking to some Hall of Fame voters is that Roger Craig had just gotten to a place where he was kind of out of people's mind, and people weren't really thinking of him, because there's newer Hall of Fame voters that are younger that don't remember the impact that he had on the 80s. So they just look and see, hey, he doesn't have 10,000 yards rushing, so he must not be worthy of this. But they don't look at the other side of it, that he was much more than just a running back. So
he had 92 receptions, by the way, in 1985. 92 receptions.
And no running back had ever had that many at that point. So that's insane. But I think that you were spot on when we first talked and you said, we need a story that's going to bring Roger back to the forefront. That's exactly what the Hall of Fame voters that I talked to said, because they believed that, when you leave the regular Hall of Fame candidacy and go into the senior circuit, so to speak, which is where Roger's at, your chances of getting into the Hall of Fame greatly diminish. And so what those kinds of guys that are in the seniors class, what they need are people like their former teammates to really sound the alarms and plead their case. And so I think that what you said back 2 years ago was exactly what needed to happen. We needed to stir up a lot of trouble, and that's what we've done. The Hall of Fame voters have all received a copy of the podcast series, and right now, like even as we speak, there's things going on behind the scenes, which I'm really excited about. People at Eddie DeBartolo's office have been reaching out to Hall of Fame voters. Joe Montana has been calling Hall of Fame voters. Ronnie Lott has been calling. And not only that, but Matt Mayoko has been doing Zoom sessions with some superstar defensive players from the 80s who played against Roger Craig. And these videos are going to be sent to the Hall of Fame voters as well. So I think that he has an excellent case. Is it going to happen? Who knows? But the bad part is, from what I understand, he's going to be the first one presented. And so that's not optimum. We'd prefer it to be, in the middle or later, so that we don't want, when you're the first, sometimes people forget by the time they vote. But I think that what's going to happen, from what I understand, is that he's going to be presented, and then there are going to be Hall of Fame voters there who are going to stand up and endorse him on the spot. I don't know if that's something that happens normally, but from what I'm told from some people at DeBartolo's office, that's something that's going to happen. So I'm super excited about that, and really grateful that guys like Montana and Lott and DeBartolo, some of these guys have decided, you know what, we're not going to just record a podcast or be part of an article. We're going to jump in and make some calls ourselves. And I think that when Joe Montana calls you, A, you pick up the phone, and B, you probably could be swayed to his way of thinking. I would think, but I'm just some fan and not a voter.
Well, there's a couple thoughts. One, first of all, Roger, the credentials are unbelievable. He's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. You could argue that the greatest 49er team of all time was the 1984 49ers that wrapped up their season at Stanford Stadium by beating Dan Marino and Don Shula and the Miami Dolphins. And in that game, Roger Craig was the best player on the field. And unfortunately for Roger, the MVP of that game went to Joe Montana. But Roger Craig, I believe, was the first running back in the history of the Super Bowl to score 3 touchdowns in a Super Bowl, and he didn't win the MVP. He was arguably the best offensive player on the field of the best 49er team in a dynasty that lasted 20 years. And, so he was on top. It wasn't like he's accumulated some stats, and it wasn't like, well, the Niners were great and he was along for the ride. No. This guy was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year in 1988. He was the best player on offense in the entire league. And to me, the most compelling argument, not to mention he's a, 1980s all-decade team. He's the NFL receptions leader in 1985. The guy was a 4-time Pro Bowler, 3-time Super Bowl champion. But to me, not only would I like to hear the emotional argument, because first of all, Roger is a spectacular human being. And at the end of the day, what is the Hall of Fame? The Hall of Fame is supposed to be, they're supposed to be the advocates and the promoters of pro football in this country. And what football player and what person connected to the NFL in any way would not want Roger Craig representing them as an ambassador? That's what Hall of Famers truly are. They're ambassadors for the great sport of football. There is no better ambassador for football than Roger Craig. He was a selfless human being as a player. And to me, that selflessness is part of the reason that he's not there. And when you say, well, what do you mean by that, Krug? I would love to be the person who made the argument for Roger Craig in front of the committee, because Roger Craig's selflessness is why he's not in. He hasn't pushed for himself, one, but his personality was such that he played on a team for a good portion of his career with the most dominant statistical football player the league has ever seen in Jerry Rice. And I've covered football for years. It's pretty rare that you have a 200-yard rusher in the same game that you have a 200-yard receiver.
Yeah.
Generally, if there's a 200-yard receiver, it was a big passing day and the running backs did very little. Or if there's a 200-yard rusher, the receivers did very little. And so Roger played with Jerry Rice. Jerry was fueled by a lot of things: the fear of failure, insecurity, the drive to be the very best. And his teammates, Walsh and his coaches, they knew that that's what drove Jerry. So they fed him the ball consistently. Where Roger was all about, I'm not saying that Jerry wasn't all about winning. Jerry was about winning. But Roger was a very selfless player.
Mm-hmm.
He played fullback for a full year to accommodate Wendell Tyler because that's the talent that the Niners had. He was always a team-oriented guy. He was the kind of guy that you could go away from and not give him the ball and go one more time to Jerry, and that would make Jerry happy, and Roger would be fine with that. And that kind of selflessness is part of the reason that they went to Jerry over and over and over again when they could. If he had been a big mouth complaining, "Hey man, get me the ball. I'm Roger Craig. I'm the man here. I was here before Jerry," then he would have gotten the ball more.
Yeah.
But he was so selfless and so self-deprecating and so about the team that he was okay with Jerry's ego being fed because Jerry needed that and Roger knew that. And so all the teammates all knew that as well. So Jerry's statistical resume, I mean, it's like, there's all kinds of analytics people in baseball and football and all throughout sports today. And they'll explain to you all kinds of truisms about the game that exist because of the statistical angle. Well, Roger Craig's statistics, I would argue, his greatest argument for the Hall of Fame is that even though he's got an incredible statistical profile, his numbers were suppressed by playing with Jerry Rice. His numbers were not increased by playing with Jerry. They were actually suppressed, as were Brent Jones's, as were John Taylor's. The guys who played with Jerry did less than their statistics. Their statistics say they did less than they actually did because Jerry's statistics were so extravagant, so incredible, so dominant. And it to me, that's the real, the kind of the intellectual argument that has to be made by an analytics person to say that if they had just been, if Roger had just touched the ball a little bit more there, he easily could have had significantly more stats, and Jerry's stats could have been slightly lower. But the personalities were such that Roger was perfectly happy to see Jerry shine, and everybody knew Jerry needed that, and Roger was such the team guy, he didn't need that. So it's not false. It's, to me, the number one argument for why Roger, who already had a great, resume, would have had a far greater resume. And so would Brent Jones, and so would John Taylor. And I think all Niner fans who lived through through that era, and all Niner players, know that to be fact. And so somehow that narrative, there's only one football, and that's just reality, and one guy's statistical dominance suppresses other people's statistics, and that's what happened here. And so that's Roger could have far greater statistics than he has. And I hope somebody makes that argument in addition to listening to all these Hall of Famers and teammates and the emotional argument, because to me, the cold, hard facts of it is there's one football, and the greatest force ever was a guy that he played with. And it's easy to be like, yeah, he played with Jerry, but Jerry didn't make him better. Right. Jerry suppressed what his numbers were, and it's not evil, but it just is. And I think that's a major. I think that in some ways is the most compelling argument for why Roger's resume is not as impressive at first glance as some other Hall of Famers.
Yeah, Ronnie Lott even mentioned that when Jerry Rice came in as a rookie, that Roger, everybody talks about Jerry's crazy work ethic, but he picked that up from Roger Craig. The hill
That
was
was
a
Jerry. That wasn't
Roger.
Jerry's hill. That was Roger's
Right.
hill.
Roger had learned that. Walter Payton had told him, find yourself a hill and run it, because that's what Payton did. Roger found the hill, and then Jerry tagged along, and it became Jerry's hill. Not putting down what Jerry did, but the whole thing where he would catch a 10-yard pass and run the length of the field. Ronnie said that Roger was doing that first. So I think that Roger made Jerry better. He may have made Jerry because of his work ethic, and Rice just picked up on that and became a workout freak. So yeah,
it was Roger's standard that Jerry met that became Jerry's standard,
right?
And then that became T.O.'s standard.
Yeah, yeah.
It's to me, and then you had a chance to talk to, give us a breakdown of who you talked to, because I know you talked to a number of different people, and what stood out to you. I'm sure a number of these guys had really emotional and compelling things to say about Roger. Any that you can recall or share with us?
Yeah, Ronnie Lott, for the story and for this series, both times said that John Madden told him, when you're the first to do something, in this case, the 1,000,000, that right there is Hall of Fame, when you're the first to do it. And at one point I asked Ronnie, what do you think it would mean to Roger Craig to make it into the Hall of Fame? And he kind of went, oh, and it was quiet for a minute and almost emotional. He said, man, this takes me back to when we were roommates, when he was a rookie, and just feeling his heart, and what he had been through and where he had come from. And so you could just sense from Ron, I mean, and Ronnie's an emotional person anyway, but you could sense that love and that respect from him. Steve Young, to me, he always says things that are really deep. He said that if you look at the running back position today, the I back is being phased out. And very soon, what we're going to see is that the only running backs that are going to really succeed in the NFL are going to be the Christian McCaffrey types, the ones that can be threats out of the backfield. And he said Roger Craig started that. And so he actually said the NFL, the Hall of Fame, needs to pay that off and put Roger Craig in Canton, because when you change a position, when you change the league, that's Hall of Fame worthy. One of the other things that jumped out to me was that Matt Mayoko told me that Bill Walsh had told him that he couldn't fully use his offense until he had Roger Craig, which blew me away, that Bill Walsh wasn't able to fully use his offense till he had Roger Craig. So when I interviewed Joe Montana for the story, I asked him what did he mean by that? And so Joe said he was an instant mismatch. So we could move the ball down the field. We didn't have to rotate guys in or out, and so the defense can't make their substitutions. We can just keep moving. And he said we could line Roger up all over the place and nobody could guard him. We had instant mismatches. And so you look at how Mike Shanahan used Ricky Waters and how Kyle Shanahan used Christian McCaffrey. And it's the same thing. It's how Walsh used Roger Craig. It's such a weapon. And we saw that last year, how this offense in San Francisco changed once McCaffrey came along. So those were two of the things that
how about Eddie D?
Did
you get a chance to talk to Eddie D at all?
I got a statement from him, but he has there's a lady who works at his office named Valerie, and she and I have communicated a lot. And so she's given me some great information. Mr. D is extremely passionate about this, and he wants Roger in the Hall of Fame probably more than anybody does. She's the one that gave me the information about how the Steelers, known for their defense, have 5 offensive players in the Hall of Fame, which is kind of crazy.
Stallworth, Swan, Franco, Bradshaw, and
and
Webster.
then Webster,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then the Cowboys from the 90s, which won 3 Super Bowls, they have 4 offensive Hall of Famers, the triplets, Irvin, Emmett,
Aikman,
and then Larry Allen.
Larry Allen.
The Rams, greatest show on turf, 1 Super Bowl, and they have 4 offensive players in the Hall of Fame.
Pace, Warner, Marshall,
Isaac Bruce, and there's a chance that Torrey Holt's going to get in. So they could end up with 5 Hall of Famers.
That's crazy.
From a team that won 1 Super Bowl, yet the dynasty that lasted for 20 years only has 3 Hall of Famers. And if you take away the 90s and exclude Steve Young, they have 2 Hall of Famers, Montana and Rice, from those teams. It's just, it's wrong. And I asked Steve Young, is there an East Coast bias? Because we hear that a lot. And he said, there is. I don't think it's intentional, but there is. And maybe it's because our games are later and they don't stick around to watch our games because they're all watching the 12 o'clock games or the 1 o'clock games. And so I don't know why, but it does seem like, because there's no way that this dynasty, because when all's said and done, how many are the Patriots? They're going to have. I mean, Brady's going to be in. Gronkowski's probably going to be in.
Maybe Ty Law, right?
Yeah, they're going to have
Richard
some
Seymour's
offensive players in the Hall of Fame and some defensive players. And so why is it that the 49ers dynasty has less? I mean, you do have Lott, you have Charles Haley, and then you have some guys who were there for a little bit, like Ricky Jackson and Richard Dent. But, I don't really count them because they weren't part of the extended dynasty. But so that was something that just really jumped out to me at why these other teams, especially the Rams, that blew me away.
You're talking. I mean, Andre Reed's in the Hall of Fame. Andre Reed is not as good a receiver as Roger Craig was a running back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no attack on Andre, but I mean, not only mention this. I mean, Roger Craig went to the playoffs every year of his career.
Yeah,
every year.
Yeah, the guy's just a winner. That's all he did was win.
Yeah. I mean, and not only that, I mean, he is exactly the kind of ambassador for the sport that would make all football people very, very proud.
One of the, sorry to interrupt, but one of the stats that you gave me was that he has more rushing yards than Larry Zonka and Gale Sayers. Both are in the Hall of Fame. So what one of the Hall of Fame voters told me was that for years, the 10,000 yards was that magical number. You had to get to 10,000 yards to get in the Hall of Fame. But for Zonka and for Gale Sayers, they both got in having less rushing yards than Roger Craig. So yeah, it's just weird Gale Sayers didn't play long and he was dynamic.
Sure.
And so certainly you have to include him, and Zonka was great too. These guys deserve to be in, but so does Roger Craig.
Yeah, no, he absolutely does. And there's so many people that will say, well, that fumble, come on, fumble. I don't think I've ever heard a dumber comment than that fumble kept him out. I mean, come on, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
A singular fumble in a game would keep a guy with this kind of passion, this kind of heart, this kind of resume out of the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's just a ridiculous thing. I just think that we're very laid back on the West Coast. Walsh was the advocate, and Eddie was the advocate, and Eddie's no longer running the team. Walsh is no longer with us. Seifert's would rather be in Bodega Bay on a fishing boat, right? You've got Joe is not a screamer yeller. I mean, there's not that ex-49er who commands the kind of respect. And they're just, the fans here are passionate about the Niners today, but they're, what's the West Coast? I mean, we'd rather on a Sunday, we'd rather go for a bike ride with our wives or girlfriends or whatever, or, go play a round of golf. And it's just a laid back kind of an existence where in Pittsburgh, you're grinding through long winters going, Mike Webster. We're not like that here. So it's like that I think is part of the differences in the culture. but Roger belongs, and he refuses to toot his own horn. And I've done events with him before, and I've talked to him about it. And he's very. It's not like he needs this to complete his life. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He's totally happy. He's a wonderful guy. He's got a wonderful family. His family's very successful. He's having success post football. It's not like he just deserves it. And he's too classy of a guy to say, I deserve this, and unfortunately everybody needs an advocate. And if I can be that advocate, if you can be that advocate, if his teammates can be his advocate, somebody needs to be his advocate, because he belongs. And what a wonderful person he is, and what an incredible ambassador for pro football he would be. And I know this day is going to come. I just don't want it to be, something that happens after he's no longer with us. I want him to be able to go to Canton and have his family there, and have all the Niner fans go out to Canton and celebrate this man for what he did and what he's done in pro football. And he was a pioneer, and he changed the game. And all the guys who have done what he's done following him are in. I mean, it'd be one thing if Marshall Faulk didn't get in, but Marshall Faulk's in.
Right.
He was the original 1,000,000. To me, his 1,000,000 season was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. I mean, it was just like throw Roger the ball in the flat and have him break 3 tackles. And I mean, people talk about how Jerry extended Joe's career. Roger extended Joe's career. I mean, how easy is it for Joe Montana to drop back to pass and flip the ball in the flat to Roger Craig, who would stiff arm one guy and go 45 yards?
Yep.
To me, if you want that, what was Roger Craig, just show the running play against the Rams,
right,
where he just had that determination and the high knees, and it's like everything about him said max effort. He was a great blocker. He was a great receiver. He was a great runner. He belongs. He belongs. And there's I'm really proud to be involved in anything that pushes his candidacy. As you can see, I'm passionate about him getting in. And I've talked to him about it. I said, Raj, all I want is a shout out, man. Just a shout out. Give me the shout out when you get in, because you belong there. And I know this day is coming. And I hope that first of all, I just want to say, Mark, great job.
Thank
you. If people are hearing this and they're passionate about Niner history and they're passionate about Roger becoming a Hall of Famer, is there anything that they can do to impact this? Is there anything that the public can do to fuel this push? Because I feel like Roger needs all the help he can get here.
Yeah, I think just finding the series. I mean, you can go on YouTube at 49ers Camelot, or wherever you listen to your audio podcasts, and just sharing those things. And because that's what when I talk to Clark Judge and when I talk to Rick Gosselin, both are Hall of Fame voters. Rick Gosselin is actually a Hall of Fame seniors voter. And when I talked to Matt Mayoko, who's a Hall of Fame voter, they just kept reiterating that, look, what he needs is more coverage, so to speak. We need his name and his story out in front of people and out in front of the voters. People have forgotten about him, and that needs to be out there. So I would say sharing those things. I don't recommend reaching out to the Hall of Fame voters, because they have been reached out to by a lot of people, and including some that, as I mentioned earlier, that have a lot more clout than anyone like me. And so we'll know something hopefully Tuesday, if not Wednesday. We should know for sure.
Well, and I'm not trying to, push one guy down and push another guy up, but anybody who saw the entirety of Roger Craig's career and saw the entirety of Frank Gore's career, I would definitely say Roger belongs in that Hall of Fame more. And yet Frank's resume, I think, because he's the third all-time rusher, is, he's likely to get in, and he belongs in, and he's an incredible story in and of himself as well. but he wasn't the same kind of player that Roger Craig was. And Roger, I think, was a better player. Roger was a better receiver. Roger, I think, I don't know about better blocker. Frank was a tremendous blocker as well.
He was.
But I mean, I'm just saying that I think Frank is going to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, was Frank the third best running back in the history of the game? No, but he's got third on the rushing list. And it's like that right there. It's like, and if you can understand that, then you can understand that, Roger Craig was one of the, how many running backs are in the Hall of Fame? 35. And he's definitely one of the 35 best running backs. And when you look at everything he contributed to this game. So, Mark, great stuff, man. Once again, if people don't know Mark Adams, go check out 49er Web Zone. I go to camp every day. I get there an hour or two early. I sit in the media room, and I look at all the articles on 49er Web Zone, Niners Nation, and I'm reading all this stuff every day, preparing for camp, preparing to ask the players and coaches questions and to bring good content to 49er fans. And you guys do an incredible job over there. Keep up the great work, and congratulations on, first of all, I just want to say thank you for being inspired to go do this. And I know for you, it's also a labor of love. For me, it was like, hey, when I saw this, I'm like, I have to speak on this. And it would make me thrilled to see Roger Craig in the Hall of Fame. And I know Niner fans everywhere feel exactly the same way as you and I do. I'll give you the final word.
Well, I appreciate you pushing me, because when I reached out to you, I was just going to write a little story, a little story that you probably would have been reading as you were getting ready for camp. But what you pushed me to, hey, if you're going to do this, let's make this huge. And so I really was like, yeah, okay. I mean, that sounds cool, but I have no idea how to do this. And then the doors opened up and things just happened. So I think, people have said that this is my thing. I've been told that multiple times, but I think that this has been a collection. There have been a lot of people behind the scenes helping me that have asked for nothing in return, who have said, hey, I know Jesse Sapolo, I can get him on your on this podcast for you. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so it's things like that. But really, to me, you were the heartbeat behind this, because you're the one that had that argument from the beginning and pushed me to get it out and bother people to the point that they would listen.
One of the things that I'm planning on doing this year, and I reached out yesterday or 2 days ago to Keena Turner, who's obviously very involved with the Niners to this day, the great Keena Turner, fantastic linebacker from Purdue, had one of the greatest hits of all time on Otis Anderson, who later became O.J. Anderson, and a New York Giant, but this was in St. Louis. He just blew him up on the turf. But Keena was a great Niner, and I was talking to him. He now has a big role in the organization and does a lot of stuff with the alums, and Guy McIntyre does as well, and Shelby Soltow. And I reached out to him and said, Keena, I'm so passionate about the Golden Heart Fund, which Eddie D and the Yorks have started and supports Niner players after they've finished playing. And I said, why don't we get some of these guys on my Krug show here on YouTube, and let's see if we can raise more money for the Golden Heart Foundation and the Golden Heart Fund. And I'm committed to doing that. And Keena's like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And one of the things I'd like to do in those interviews is get each one of these guys' thoughts on Rodgers' Hall of Fame candidacy. And so whether he gets in, if he doesn't get in this time, we're going to keep pushing. We're just going to keep pushing. Yeah. And I'm going to make sure I ask a lot of these players for their anecdotes. And at some point, somebody's going to listen, and they're going to say, you know what? There's too much momentum here for us to look the other way. And we're going to put Roger Craig in Canton, Ohio. And I'm passionate about it. You're passionate about it. Niner fans everywhere are passionate about it. His teammates are passionate about it, and it's going to happen. So we just got to maintain that confidence.
Yep. Yeah, he has great chance this time. If it doesn't happen, we already have talked Plan B. So we'll be prepared for next year.
Mark, thanks for stopping by, man. Have a great weekend. Go Niners. And I once again thank you for taking the baton and running with it, man. I'm proud of your efforts, and hopefully there'll be a day and we'll be standing there in Canton, Ohio,
Yeah,
hugging over this, because
that would
I
be
can see
great.
that day. How great would that day be?
That would be
A
so
summer
fun.
day in Canton, Ohio, as Roger Craig gets announced as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
I've never been to Canton, but that is a trip that I am looking forward to taking. And we just have to be determined, and we'll make it reality.
Yep.
Mark, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it.
Mark Adams, 49er Web Zone, does an incredible job. All right, a couple chats I want to get to, but first let's shout out our sponsors. Bottom of the screen, Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com. Give them a call. You break a windshield, you need someone to pop out the old one, glaze in the new one, take away the mess of glass, and do it conveniently and cheaply. Marin Auto Glass is where the guys I use. marinautoglass.com, 415-883-3030. We're also brought to you by New York Style Sausage Company. The only Italian sausage I will eat is New York Style Sausage. And let's not forget the title sponsor of the Krug Show, Pig in a Pickle. The best barbecue in all of Northern California. Get the brisket chili. Damon and Mary work at it. That's why they got a great restaurant. They're open from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. in both spots 7 days a week, Emeryville and Corte Madera. It's the best barbecue in Northern California. I've had people contact me from other states. Hey, I'm coming out for a Niner game in November, and all I know is I'm going to hit Pig in a Pickle on the way in. And I'm like, you better go do it. And go say hi to Damon, say hi to Mary, tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. Here's what their spot in Marin County looks like.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. You know, how can you go to church if you don't believe in God? You know, and along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. You know, it wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, you know, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, you know, that life is good.
All right, coming down the home stretch on the Krug Show on a Friday night. It is 5:50, almost time for dinner. Busy day today, man. Done a lot of streaming today. Back at it tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The coach will be in the house. Digital Drew will be alongside, and we're gonna blow it out in the morning and talk Niner football in advance of tomorrow night's preseason game number 2, which I will be in attendance for at Levi's Stadium. The 49ers and the Broncos. Will we see Brock Purdy? How will Trey Lance fare? Will Sam Darnold do his thing? Who will compete for the final spots on the 53-man roster? Very competitive situation. And then, of course, when the game ends, I'll go into the locker room, talk to some of the players, and we will go live post-game, and looking forward to a big night talking Niner football tomorrow night with you guys. So Niners in the morning, Niners in the evening, Niners late tomorrow night. A lot of Niners. All right, let's hit the chat here. Eric Hernandez. Eric, good to see you. He says, big sausage. Big sausage money business. There you go. Digital Drew getting ready for the pipes for the morning says, woohoo, woohoo. MF in the house. What's up, MF? Larry, will there be post-game tomorrow? MF, do you need to ask that? Yes, there will be post-game tomorrow. I won't come on immediately after the game because I'm going to run into the locker room and talk to a few guys. And then I'll pop back upstairs. And yes, they will be post-game tomorrow night on the Krug Show. Looking forward to that. 14 Ace Windu says, don't mess with the Sausage Mafia. Oh, man. Giants down 3-0, by the way. I see this one. MF says, 10 strikeouts for the Giants offense tonight. Kapler has lost the offense since 2021. A change needs to be made. No Cap tonight, though, huh? Suspended. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. Bomber T in the house. Hey, Bomber. He says, you're the freaking man, Larry. Appreciate you, Bomber. Bomber's been with us for almost since the beginning. Jay Boogie, 510, says, Roger Craig is the epitome of a Hall of Famer. Jedi, watching the Craig highlights, Montana throws darts, man. Yeah, Joe was good. This just in, Joe Montana was pretty good. All right, he's talking about Lucius. Lucius Thomas says, talking about Gore and Frank. They should both, or Gore and Craig, they should both get in. But Gore shouldn't get in before Craig, though. That's crazy. I agree. They both belong in. Craig belongs in first. We got this one from CJ Gray. What's up, CJ? Good to hear from you. He says, no hate on Frank, but the comparison to the all-time greats, he just doesn't measure up to it. More of his longevity that produced those numbers. Nothing against Frank. I mean, Frank is, I used to tell Gary Radnich on the radio, Frank's a better human being than you and I. What I meant by that is the guy tore both ACLs in college and still went out and have this amazing career. Yeah, I mean, Dusty Gold says Roger was the best all-purpose back. He should be in. All right, a couple starred chats I missed. Riddy Muse said, hey, Riddy. He says, catfish. Not sure exactly what that's about, but $19.99. Thank you, Riddy, for the support. And Christopher Foland just donates $9.99 just for the hell of it. Just, hey, you know what? Here's $9.99. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that as well. All right, I'm going to go have some dinner. Tune in tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. West Coast, noon on the East Coast. The coach will be in the house. He's fired up to talk. And Digital Drew's going to join us from Chicago. So the coach is joining us, I think, from Maryland. Digital Drew in Chicago, the headquarters of Mortal Kombat. And I'll be out here on the West Coast. We'll talk for an hour or so. We'll wrap and talk some Niners, and it should be lively. Join me in the morning for that. And then I'm off to Ninerland. Get there early. Maybe do some interviews on the field before the game. Do some interviews in the locker room after the game, and we'll go live. And tomorrow night we'll hopefully talk about a great performance. And who knows? You never know. We'll see what the game story looks like. Hopefully they'll play better than 34-7 against the Raiders. But you know what? It doesn't really matter. It's the preseason. And you know what I'm predicting? I'm predicting that tomorrow, during the game, the 49ers will announce that they've signed Nick Bosa. They'll put it on the scoreboard. And the 49ers, fourth quarter, thank you, Niner fans, and just announcing the 49ers have signed Nick Bosa to a contract extension. And the people at Levi's, they'll go crazy for Bosa. It's about that time, all right? I made it perfectly clear how I felt about the Bosa holdout. I don't care. I don't care about missing early camp when you're Nick Bosa. The guy's in great shape. He doesn't need camp. But it's now, today's the 18th. Tomorrow's the 19th. I said if we get to the 20th, then I'll be, I'm ready for Bosa. We're there. Get him signed in the next day, the next 2 days, the next 3 days. Folks, it's Bosa time. He needs a couple practices and maybe a series in the last preseason game. Maybe not even that. Maybe just a week of practices. But I don't want to see him in a rush to get ready for Heinz Field and the Steelers. I don't want him to stress out his body, and push himself like football players do in week one. I really believe they've had this done for months, and that this is really more about doing this the right way and keeping him out of those joint practices with the Raiders, keeping him out of preseason games that he doesn't need to be playing in. But right now is the time. It's the 18th. If you get him signed on the 20th or the 19th or 20th, right in there, get him out to practice for a few days. Let him break a sweat, feel that soreness that you feel a couple days after. You can be in shape, but it's different than football shape. But I think we're there. I was an advocate of them not signing him until this point, and now we're at that point where it's Bosa time. It's time to get him signed and ready. And this is, to me, if they signed him in the next couple days, that would absolutely would be the smart thing. I think that's the perfect way. The perfect way for the Niners to handle the Bosa thing was to not sign him until tomorrow or Monday, and then get him out for the final week of practice, get him lubed up on game day, and away we go. Riddy Musich said, my dad always would yell catfish when Roger Craig would have a big run. There you go. I really appreciate the donation, Riddy. Also, Digital Drew says, I expect a bounce back from Trey Lance just to increase the confusion more for the quarterback talk. LOL. Trey's going to play better. Trey was rusty. Trey hadn't played since September. Everybody needs to pump the brakes. Did he look good? No. Did he look fidgety? Yes. Did he get better as the game went on? Yes. Is he going to look worlds better in this game? Yes. Everybody just breathe in. Deep breaths. It's going to be okay. Trey's going to be just fine, everybody. And I'd like to see Purdy as well. I think Purdy needs to play a series or two. And I'd love to see Darnold get in there for a series. Maybe two. I feel good about where the Niners are at. I really do. All right. I'm going to go have dinner. Have a great night, everybody. I'm going to watch the rest of this Giants game. 3-0 Braves in the 6th. Are you telling me that the San Francisco Giants with this prolific offense have not a single run through 6 innings? I'm shocked.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you